Students, I hope you will be fine. A very few days of Ramadan are left, and Eid is approaching. It seems very odd, like teaching like this, and of course, it's not easy to study like this as well. But in the present scenario, this is the best we can do. So, starting with today's first introductory lecture. Uh, Before coming to the subject, I think I would like to discuss one thing. As you people know, that AS students, they have gone for the predicted grades. But as far as A-level result is concerned, usually, not usually, of course, every year, your overall A-level grade, that is based on your AS level grade and your A2 grade. But this time, this is going to be different. Whatever the grades you're going to get in AS, they're not going to have any weightage for your overall A-level grade. So whatever the grade you are going to get in your A2 papers, that's going to determine your overall A-level grade. So we can imagine how much important is A2 now for every one of you. So that's why I would suggest, please, I can understand during Ramadan, and especially the last Ashra of Ramadan is going on, and it's not easy to get up early in the morning, but it's okay, 2 or 3 days are left behind after Eid when we are going to start the classes once again. So that's my sincere advice to all of you, please take these classes very, very seriously. As far as A2 is concerned, obviously this is an extension of A-level. Extension is always tough. In AS, when you will look at the papers which are coming in A2, you will find that there is a greater difficulty level in A2 as compared to AS. Just like in AS, you find it more difficult as compared to O3. So same is the case over here. A2 papers are quite tough as compared to AS papers. So let's have a brief introduction about the various types of papers which you are going to be which are going to be conducted in A2. It's paper 4 and it's paper 5. As far as paper 4 is concerned, it's of 2 hours duration, and its total marks are carrying a total marks of 100. This paper has the maximum weightage of all your papers. If I look at it from collective A level, then its weightage is 38.5 of total A level. But if this time, if it is going to be only considered the A2 papers, so of course you can see that this is going to be 77%. So you can imagine, you can understand the importance of paper 4 as it has got the highest weightage as well. Okay. As far as its division is concerned, it has got 2 sections, section A and section B. Section A is of 85 marks. Section B is of 15 marks. In section B, there are 2 questions, each of 15 marks. And here you get an option. You can attempt any one of those 2 questions, right? As far as section A is concerned, all the questions in this section, they are compulsory and they are all structured questions. While in case of section B, these are the essay questions. Each essay question is usually have 2 parts, part A and B. Part A, mostly it's a division of 9 or 6 or 8 or 6 or 9 and a 5, right? So anyhow, it's only in section B where you have an option that 2 questions are given and you have to attempt any one of those 2 questions. While in section A, all the questions are compulsory, and this section comprises of 85 marks and it includes only structured questions. Okay? Now, as far as paper 5 is concerned, its duration is 1 hour 15 minutes and its total marks are 30. It usually have 2 questions, and sometimes it may have 3 questions as well. Of course, when there are 3 questions, then the questions, all the 3 questions, comparatively the last 2 questions, they are very short as compared to the question number 1. If there are 2 questions, then mostly what happens, question 1 is the lengthiest one, question 2 is the shorter one comparatively. Because if you look at the marks deviance, sometimes question 1 is so lengthy, it can be of 19 marks, it can be of 21 marks, right? There is a certain strategy for question number 1, that's why. Now, if you see, as far as the syllabus is concerned, when you were studying in AAS, you people have looked at, you people must have looked at the syllabus booklet, and you have seen that it's again repeated that paper 1 is based on AS syllabus, paper 2 is based on AS syllabus, paper 3 is based on AS syllabus. But when we talk about paper 4 and 5, it says it's based on A-level syllabus. What does it mean? Because in A2 papers, questions may be related to whatever you people have studied in AS as well. But of course, it cannot be a major portion. It can be a small part of any question. But anyhow, AS syllabus can be assessed to a smaller extent in A2 papers. Particularly in paper 5, sometime a whole question can be based on AS syllabus. For example, immobilized enzymes, general enzymes. It can be about mitosis. It can be about the question related to the respiration. It can be a question related to the blood circulation in mammals. And sometimes the question in paper 5, they can be set out of the contents which are not the part of the syllabus at all. Right? A general scenario is given with which you are not familiar at all. But in that case, of course, everything is given in the question. All the instructions are given in the question. The whole scenario is completely given in detail in that question. If you go through those instructions, if you go through that detail, you can easily attempt the question, right? So this was all about the introduction of the papers which are going to be there in A2. So now coming to the syllabus for A2. Now, as far as the syllabus for A2 is concerned, there are total 8 chapters. The first one is of energy and respiration, second is photosynthesis, third is homeostasis, fourth is coordination, fifth one is inherited change, sixth one is selection and evolution, the seventh one is biodiversity and classification, while eighth one is gene technology. There are many topics in A2 about which you don't have any familiarity in O-level, right? So they are going to be quite new topics to you people as well. We are going to start with the very first chapter, which is energy and respiration. Okay. So students, you see, when we talk about the term energy, all the living organisms which are present on Earth, they require a continuous supply of energy to stay alive. We cannot imagine about our survival without the supply of energy, right? And as far as the sources of energy are concerned, of course, the sources of energy, they are two. It can either be the light energy from sun. Second is chemical potential energy, which is stored in nutrient molecules. Right? So the source of energy, it could be the light energy from sun. It can also be the chemical potential energy, which is stored in the nutrient molecules. Now, if we come to the light energy, photosynthesis is the process which transfers this light energy into chemical energy. Other living organisms, other than those who can photosynthesize, they are unable to convert this light energy into chemical energy, right? Generally speaking, there are exceptions over there, but we are not going to talk about those right now, okay? So as far as the process of photosynthesis is concerned, light energy is transferred into the chemical energy, and that chemical energy is stored in the form of nutrient molecules, which are manufactured as a result of photosynthesis, right? Basically, all the form of life on the earth, it depends on the process of photosynthesis, either directly or indirectly. Directly means when we are going to utilize the plants directly, like we can take the examples of herbivores which are feeding on the plants. We can take our own example, because we are eating plants as well as we are consuming other animals which are relying on the plants in on the other side. So we depend on the process of photosynthesis either directly or indirectly. So we can say basically whatever the form of energy we are utilizing, all the living organisms which are present here and they are utilizing this form of energy, it comes from photosynthesis actually. So actually we depend on, and photosynthetic organisms, they are mainly the green plants. So we are actually relying on the plants either directly or indirectly for our source of energy. And not only the source of energy, photosynthesis supplies us with two things. First is energy. Second is usable carbon compounds. Of course, energy we understand, because light energy is transferred into the chemical energy. This chemical energy is stored in the nutrient molecules which are manufactured as a result of photosynthesis. Then what do we mean by the usable carbon compounds? If I just come to photosynthesis briefly, what is the main product of photosynthesis? That is the carbohydrates. These are the organic molecules, organic, right? Now, carbohydrates, it's not only that in the process of photosynthesis, obviously the direct product which is formed, that is the carbohydrate, and the main carbohydrate is the glucose. But then this glucose, it is converted into some other form of carbohydrates, like for sucrose, maybe converted into starch for storage. And of course, if it has to be transported, it has to be converted into sucrose. Then you see at that stage of photosynthesis where carbohydrates are manufactured, some of the carbohydrates, they condense to form the other organic molecules, for example, proteins, lipids, etc. So that's why we say process of photosynthesis supplies us two things: energy, secondly usable carbon compounds. ठीक है? अब आप देखो photosynthesis में actually before this we come to two terminologies: autotrophs and heterotrophs. You people have studied these two terminologies in your previous classes, but what was the concept given over there in case of autotrophs and heterotrophs? Autotrophs, we say that those organisms who are able to manufacture their own food by the process of photosynthesis, they are called as autotrophs. And those who are not able to manufacture their own food by the process of photosynthesis, rather they rely on autotrophs, they are called as heterotrophs, right? But over here, now the definition of autotroph and heterotroph, it bit changes. Now we say that those living organisms who are able to use inorganic carbon source in the form of carbon dioxide, they are called as autotrophs. And heterotrophs are those living organisms who depend on ready-made supply of organic carbon compounds, right? So you can see over here, though the thing remains the same. Of course, carbon dioxide fixation only takes place in photosynthesis, right? So once again, the process of photosynthesis is there, just the words in which we give the definition that changes, because carbon, like you can see that in the environment, carbon dioxide is present in the air, it is present all around us. But are we able to, like if we look at ourselves, are we able to use this carbon dioxide, which is actually present in the form of inorganic form, right? Of course, we can't use it. Rather, we are going to breathe it out when we are going to when we are going to exhale, then we take out the carbon dioxide. But otherwise we cannot utilize this carbon dioxide. It's only autotrophs who can use this inorganic carbon source in the form of carbon dioxide. So such organism who can use this carbon dioxide which is present in its inorganic form, they are called as autotrophs. And those organisms who depend on the ready-made supply of organic carbon compounds, they are called as heterotrophs. I hope these two terms are clear. कर दो. Now the organic molecules inside our bodies, they can be utilized in two ways. First of all, they can be used as building blocks. They can be used to make other compounds which are required by us, which are essential for us. Secondly, they can be oxidized, they can be broken down in respiration, and as a result of that, energy is released. And that energy is utilized by living organisms, right? So organic molecules, they can be used in two ways. Either they can act as the building blocks, making other organic compounds which are required by us. And secondly, they can be broken down in the process of respiration. And as a result of respiration, energy is released, and that energy is used for the formation of ATP. And actually ATP is the energy currency of our cells, right? you know, when we go to the bazaar, we trade in our local currency. So same as your body, your cells, they are going to trade with the help of this ATP. That's why ATP is called as the universal energy currency of the cell. We will talk about it in detail later on. ये मार्कर लाइट है, वही पतला है फिर. Next we come to, now we say energy. Now we come to the energy. Energy is required for various processes to occur in the body. This question often comes with maybe 2 or 3 marks. Okay, so if you see, as far as the various examples of the work where energy is utilized, what are those examples? First of all, it can be all those processes in which complex substances are manufactured. From simpler ones. And of course, there are anabolic reactions. Examples can be formation of monosaccharides, they lead to the formation of polysaccharides. If we talk about amino acids, they lead to the formation of polypeptides. It's better not to use the word of proteins over here, because one protein may have more than one polypeptide chain which are linked later on. So basically, when the amino acids are linked with each other, they form a polypeptide chain. That's why it's appropriate to use the word of polypeptides here rather than proteins. If we talk about fatty acids and glycerol, they lead to the formation of lipids. Then nucleic acids from nucleotides. So these are the various main examples, the major examples of anabolic reactions inside the body of the living organisms, where there is a formation of complex substances from the simpler ones. So you can say all of these monosaccharides, amino acids, fatty acids and glycerol, nucleotides, these are all the simpler, they're smaller subunits. And once they combine with each other, they form, actually these are the macromolecules. And these are the micromolecules, okay? So the macromolecules are formed from the micromolecules. These are the anabolic reactions, and for these all reaction, energy is required. Second example of work where energy is required, that is a very, very important process, and that is active transport. Now we know about active transport. It's the movement of molecules or ions against the concentration gradient. Of course, when we say against the concentration gradient, means from a low concentration to a high concentration, and of course for that energy is required. So the second main example of work where energy is utilized, that is the active transport. Then we can take the example of some mechanical work in the body. So if we see the example of mechanical work, it can be muscular contraction, muscle contraction. Then conduction of nerve impulses. Right? Then there are certain cellular movements. Now, what do we mean by cellular movements? Cellular movements, like you can say, like, of course, it doesn't mean the movement of the cell itself when we are talking about the multicellular living organism. However, we can talk about the movement of the cell itself when we are talking about a unicellular organism. For example, amoeboid movement is there. Amoeba is a small, it's a unicellular aquatic organism. It's found in the pond water, right? So its movement, for its movement, energy is required, right? But as far as the other cellular movements are concerned, as I'm saying, if we are talking about a multicellular organism, of course, cells are not going to move from their place. What do we mean by the cellular movements then? Cellular movements, for example, it can be the movement of cilia and flagella, right? Like cilia, you have studied in AS. Cilia are present on the outer lining of our cells, which are which are present in the trachea, which are making up the inner lining of the trachea. So you can by the movement of cilia, that mucus is taken out, right? So movement of cilia and flagella, once again the same. Then it can be the movement of certain vesicles inside the cytoplasm of the cell, that also comes in the cellular movements. Then you will see there are certain living organisms which are going to give light and electrical discharge. For example, when we are talking about the light, it can be a firefly which emits the light, and that is possible with that. And of course, that process requires energy. Second is electrical discharge. There are many types of fish which produce a small amount of electric current. For example, stingray is there, ray fish is there. So many other marine marine animals are there in this category. So these are the few. There are so many other examples. For obviously the process of cell division requires energy. There are so many others, but these are the major examples of the various types of work which need energy in your body, right? Now, one very important uses of energy, that is thermal energy. Thermal energy, obviously, as a result of various metabolic reactions in the body, energy is released, and some of that energy is converted into heat energy or thermal energy, and that thermal energy is going to maintain the body temperature. So with this reference, we can categorize the living organism into two categories. For example, like they are ectotherms and they are endotherms. Ectotherms are those living organisms who depend on the heat which is coming from their outside environment to maintain their body temperature. And endotherms are those living organisms. Sometimes, simply we use the terms of warm-blooded and cold-blooded, though these terminologies are not used anymore now. So that's why we will don't try to write those terminologies other than ectotherms and endotherms. Endotherms are those living organisms who are able to maintain their own body temperature, and how they are able to maintain their own body temperature as a result of the thermal energy which is released as a result of various metabolic reaction. They use that thermal energy to maintain their body temperature throughout the year, no matter whatever is the external temperature. That's why you will see, like, we are the examples of endotherms. Mammals and birds. They are the examples of endotherms, right? Whereas ectotherms includes like amphibians are there, reptiles are there, fishes are there. They are the examples of ectotherms. So ectotherms are those living organisms who depend on the outer heat which is present in their environment to maintain their body temperature. That's why whenever the temperature raises too much, or if the temperature gets low too much, then their metabolic activities are reduced much. And they don't show a very active living pattern at that time, while this is different in case of endotherms because we are able to maintain our own body temperature. And of course, for maintaining the body temperature, we have a negative feedback loop. And you people obviously know about the negative feedback loop, but let me tell you once again here, though we are going to study it in detail in the process of in the yeah. हाँ बस ये खत्म करना है. So negative feedback means if temperature increases, something happens inside the body which is going to correct it back to the lower temperature. If temperature decreases, then something again happens in the body which is going to increase the temperature. So that's why we call this negative loop, negative feedback loop, because whatever happens in the body, something happens opposite to that to correct it. That's why this is called as negative feedback loop. So we are able to maintain our body temperature through a very precise system of negative feedback. खत्म जल्दी हो गया.